we're going to now talk some to and hear from Rodney Alsup, who is a professor and emeritus and a associate dean for graduate programs at Kennesaw State University. And we're going to talk about unbundling graduate programs and the MBA. Rodney really comes at this from a great angle. He's a founding director of several MBA programs, including the one that's the corporate one for Verizon, the one at IBM in Atlanta, University System of Georgia, their web MBA, and executive MBA for physicians. He is also director of international programs for the Romanian American Postgraduate School of Business and is the founder of the MBA News Digest and the MBA News Digest Academy. So, Rodney, are you on? Are you able to share your screen?
John,
and really quick,
I'm trying to share.
It's not working, Rodney?
How about now? The sharing's not working.
Okay,
Let's see here.
JTH, why don't you share? But while you're while we're getting the share up, I want to give you just a background on how I met Rodney. I was doing I don't know if Rodney, if you remember this, I did a future of work keynote at Michigan State. Rodney was in the audience. In the end of my presentation, Rodney was asking a lot of great questions, and he was citing stats and data and everything else. And I was like, wow, this guy is totally in and understands, what, schools have to do. And then after the words, I was sitting around with, a cup of coffee. They're like, do you know who that guy was that's been talking to you about all that stuff? He's Rodney Alsup. We all listened to him. And so all of these graduate programs basically said, Rodney is like the guy that they all listen to. And of course, I befriended Rodney after, and he has the MBA Digest, and it is well known in the market, and he's well known. And me and Rodney have become really good friends. And Rodney, I'm grateful for the time that you're giving us.
And I'm glad that we can count ourselves as those who listen to you.
Thank you.
I'll drive, and I've got it up. You'll just tell me, as to when you want to move on. I'll be glad to do that. And then I'm going to kill my video, but I'll be here on mute.
Okay, John. Thanks, Matt and John. It's kind of interesting because I think after watching all of the sessions yesterday and most of those today, I think I now know enough to prepare this session. I feel like I'm bringing up having to meet a high standard for all of the presenters that have come to this point now. Briefly, just my pathway. Matt, you've shared yours, and several others have shared theirs. I came from a rural community and went to a state institution, and after the first year, that institution asked me to not return because of such a stellar academic performance that year as a freshman. Then, some 9 years later, I earned a doctoral degree from that same institution. It's one of those things that I had not planned on, but at the same time, I did find my ultimate career and probably passion, so to speak. But let me start off with just a little bit of what I do. As the founder and publisher of the MBA News Digest, I've had the privilege of publishing a weekly intelligence briefing for graduate program leaders and their team members. The objective of that is to keep them informed about what's going on in graduate education, graduate business education, and higher education. And the B school, and this is about B schools around the world. Now, I connect and interact with several thousand graduate business education professionals each month. In preparing the weekly briefings, I've curated and archived more than 10,000 articles for subscribers since 2007. Doing so has given me a unique opportunity to make observations about graduate education and higher education and how it's responding to this ever-changing business environment. Now you can see that my frame of reference is graduate business education. However, I think the points that I'll make today apply to all graduate programs being offered today at most institutions. Now, my comments will be coming from a graduate program director's perspective, a program management perspective that's deep in the campus organization, looking up and out, if you will. I'll follow the format that most everyone else has followed with a little bit of why, what's next if the status quo is maintained, and close with some suggestions and thoughts. So let me start with three themes. And John, if you'll run it to the three themes, I'll talk about those for a few seconds. These three themes have kept my attention during the past 2 or 3 years. What I see is a lack of recognition and responsiveness to what is termed exponential change, as evidenced by a lack of curriculum change and new course development. Now, I'm not talking about the change that's associated with COVID-19. I'm talking about the systemic and pervasive change that is occurring outside of higher education's institutions. This change is going to continue even after COVID. However, the pandemic does provide an opportunity for action should campus leaders want to address any aspect of these three themes. So why should you be thinking about these themes and how will each impact you and your organization? Okay, John, we'll go to the next one. Individuals and organizations react to change in different ways at different rates. And this is a chart from Deloitte. I've used it multiple times in many things that I've done. It shows the rate of change for the past 5 or so decades that's associated with technology, individuals, businesses, and public policy. Now you can see a disparity between these 4 trend lines. The greatest rate of change is associated with technology. Now that's not surprising, while the least is associated with public policy. And for most of us, that's not surprising either. Now, with the rate of change increasing at increasing rates and using this chart as a reference point, let me ask you a few questions. I would like for you to answer each question by visualizing a trend line similar to these 4 and fitting it on this graph. Where would your current and future students fit? Second, where do the employers of your students and alumni fit? And third, where would your institution and faculty and staff fit? And fourth, where would the course and curriculum content of any of your graduate management education programs fit? Now, let me speculate just a little bit. Your answers to the first 2 questions likely fitted lines that closely paralleled the individual and business trend lines. The third question, faculty and staff, you probably would have paralleled the business trend line. Now, to the question that really interests me is your curriculum and course content. Where do you fit your lines? Based on my experience as an associate dean, a faculty member, and a graduate program director, your lines probably paralleled the public policy trend line if you were objective. I say this because your bureaucratic processes and systems are controlling the rate of change, and few academic leaders are willing to tackle the campus bureaucracy to bring about some of the needed changes. Consider the following. 2 top 25B schools recently reported the completion of their 2-year curriculum review initiatives. 2 years. The reporting was done via press releases in a promotional context. Now, on a related front, research indicates that many B schools conduct major curriculum reviews every 3 to 7 years. Now, if a graduate program's curriculum is taking 2 years to be reviewed and updated, and the review is taking place every 3 to 7 years, then many students are being recruited into programs that may not be preparing them for the roles they will be filling when they graduate, let alone for the roles they will be aspiring to fill. Now, an argument I know could be made that curriculum is kept current through new course offerings, but there's evidence suggesting otherwise. Data from the top 25 US business schools shows an interesting distribution of new graduate course offerings. During the fall of 2017, 132 new courses were offered in these schools. And in 2019, the number grew to 182. If evenly distributed, that's a little over 5 new courses per B school in 2017 and 7 in 2019, but they're not. They're not evenly distributed. The numbers are skewed toward a small number of new courses being offered by 4 schools, and 4 schools offered no new courses. One program alone in 2017 accounted for 18 new courses. Through additional inquiry, I found that the B school that added 18 new courses approves new courses at the department level in as little as 30 to 45 days. The programs that offered no new courses can take as much as an academic year to approve a new course. Now, there's a very high probability that many courses and program curricula are not keeping pace with the rate of change depicted in the Deloitte chart. If true, then there are several million master's degree holders whose degree content is out of date and may have been out of date when the students graduated. The most recent data from the National Center for Education Statistics shows more than 1 million degree holders were earning their graduate business degrees during the most recent years shown on the Deloitte graph. Now, add to this number earlier graduates from those same programs, and we can see a very, very large market for postgraduate refresher training and lifelong learning skill development, a potential revenue source that is being ignored by many institutions. But more importantly, many graduate programs are failing to fulfill an implicit contract they enter into when they enroll students into their graduate programs, and that is providing them with content that is relevant for their chosen career path. Now, John, if you'll take us to the next slide. Couple the exponential change with something I'm calling the useful life of curriculum course content. Now, let me orient you to this graphic, if you will, and I'll try to talk you through it a little bit blindly. The vertical axis is percentage, the horizontal is time, and my downward sloping line represents the decline in whatever it is you're measuring. Now, what I'm measuring in some cases is relevancy of the course content, recency of the graduate, the mastery of the content, any attribute that you want to measure can be placed on this graph. Now, the green oval represents the total curriculum that an individual is exposed to or is partook in during their degree offering. Now, to the left of my downward sloping line is the percent that is still relevant, the percent of that content that is still relevant. So if you look to the right of the sloping line, that's the percent of the content that is not relevant. When I say that, you can see that theoretically, there's a built-in decline, a built-in obsolescence, if you will, that's a function of student learning and retention, curriculum and course relevancy, the work being done by a graduate, the workplace where the work is done, and the makeup of the workforce. And you can see even more growth in market potential for some form of lifelong learning or refresher training and development. Now, here are a few critical questions that graduate program leaders, campus leaders may want to consider. For any given intake of graduates, how much course and curriculum content from the conferring degree is still relevant? And how much of that content did graduates master during their program? And how much of that content did graduates master, retain, and are still using? Now, obviously, extensive research is needed to answer these questions, and most of these answers are going to be at the program specific and relate to assurance of learning. Now, unfortunately, at least on the business school side, the assurance learning programs are viewed as an accreditation compliance issue and not so much as a useful source of action-based decision-making information. Now, John, if you'll take us to the next slide, what happens if status quo prevails? That is, exponential change continues and higher education continues responding to this change as it has in the past. Okay, I think this quote summarizes the situation. Paraphrasing, if the rate of change inside our colleges and universities is slower than outside, we will start seeing programs close, colleges and universities close, and mergers. We're already seeing reductions in force through furloughs and program eliminations, and at some institutions, even tenured faculty are at risk. Now, I realize that many of you want to attribute this to COVID, and there may be some basis for that argument. But what I want to suggest is that COVID was accelerate the timeline for the inevitable. Unfortunately, the response by many campuses to the COVID crisis was to create new degree programs. Since the first day of April, B schools created almost 100 new graduate degree programs. The result of these new programs is likely the cannibalization of existing students or applicants already in the pipeline for existing programs and not necessarily the attraction of new students. So what can campus leaders do? So John, if you'll take us to the next one. First, identify and eliminate legacy rules that no longer serve a useful purpose. Now, many of our legacy rules have a direct impact on our revenue streams as well. I wrote a blog article several weeks ago and posted it. The title, Change These Legacy Rules and Put More Qualified Graduate Student Butts in Seats. Now, one of the examples that I used was repeating a graduate course for credit. Many of our part-time graduate students are taking 3 or 4 years to complete their degree. When faculty members make significant changes to graduate courses they teach, and students took the course 2 or 3 years ago, and the revised course is significantly different, will a student that repeats the course benefit? I think so. Then why not let them repeat the course for credit and pay a fee? Second, implement continuous curriculum and course reviews. Way back in 2011, I wrote an article for the MBA Roundtable titled From Episodic to Continuous Curricular Renewal. I think continuous curriculum and course reviews are a necessity for addressing exponential change. Rather than centralizing course and curriculum change, decentralize it. Give departments the authority for creating new courses and give faculty the flexibility to change their course content as they see fit, rather than going through the departments, the B schools, the campus committee structure. Now, this is particularly important for new course creation. This would create a responsive curriculum that can be changed when change is needed and not 1 or 2 or 3 years down the road. But now keep in mind, one of the problems that we have is most faculty have never been taught how to teach or design a course or manage a graduate program's curriculum. But yet, we've put them in charge of creating and delivering our education product and services. We need to teach them how to be creators and orchestrators of learning experiences and not just deliverers of content. Third, unbundle and refocus current degree offerings. Now, let me explain this using the full-time MBA. The MBA first offered in the US in the early 1900s has evolved to what it is today. Full-time MBA programs, graduate students graduate students with limited or no work experience. These students usually take entry-level jobs that require them to manage frontline employees, projects, processes, etc. It could be 15 to 20 years before they move up in the organization high enough to use much of the content covered in their MBA, which could then be out of date. Put another way, many of our MBA programs are taught as if all of their graduates are going to be Fortune 100 CEOs. Most are not. An alternative is to create a master's in management program that focuses on leading and managing people, and then redesign the MBA so it focuses on leading and managing organizations. Focus the master's in management degree on early adulthood careers and the MBA on middle to late adulthood careers, and emphasize mastery versus exposure in both. All students graduating from the Master's in Management program would be candidates for the MBA. And by the way, they've been pre-screened and have work experience when they would enter the MBA. As a matter of fact, Master's in Management graduates could be granted automatic admissions into an MBA program. Fourth and final, identify and eliminate campus silos. Now, the common silo examples, the alumni and development offices, academic units, faculty research and teaching. One of the major issues with these silos is the possessiveness or ownership of contacts, program graduates, donors, etc. Now, Scott and Brandon earlier in the One Badger program hit on this, and this is their approach is to eliminate some silos on campus. It's going to take a lot more work, but they're moving in the right direction. A common database for all academic units, alumni office and development is rarely created and centrally managed on most campuses. Now, I worked with one institution several years ago. We found 27 databases on campus that contained a list of graduates from various programs. The School of Accountancy had one, nursing had one, and obviously the alumni office had one and the development office had one. From a cost benefit and risk management standpoint, that is a nightmare. But more importantly, if you're creating a new program and you want access to contacts, graduates, and so forth, where do you start when trying to market that new program? Another issue is the faculty research and teaching. Faculty are rewarded for their research, which may or may not contribute to a program's course and curriculum. Rarely are they rewarded for good teaching, only penalized for poor classroom performance. Now, in closing, and you can move it on to one more slide, John. In closing, here are my final thoughts. All of us had memorable learning experiences, some positive and some negative. Two of my most memorable positive experiences, the U.S. Army's helicopter flight training program, which I participated in and attended many years ago, and more recently, ballroom dancing. Yeah, ballroom dancing and social dance. Every day in flight school, I was engaged. Every dance lesson, I am engaged. But both experiences have more in common than engagement. Both were hands-on and both focused on mastery. Traditionally, these types of learning experiences are not found much in higher education. Now, what I have suggested is short-term fixes, so to speak. What's needed is a longer-term approach, and many of the presentations yesterday and today have addressed these long-term approaches. Miriam was fantastic yesterday, and Brent and John's EHE model was fantastic. Or perhaps, Matt, John, perhaps a paradigm shift is needed. And if I recall correctly, paradigm shifts start outside the organization or the industry. Matt, John, you all have brought together a group of thought leaders that are no longer constrained by higher education's culture, traditions, and bureaucracy. We are no longer the insiders. Perhaps this will be the start of a paradigm shift.
That was a great talk, Rodney, and I really liked your discussion about how what you learn, you know, disintegrates sort of over a period of time, and that you could even walk out from a program without actually having the skill that you needed to go into the program with, actually survive in the outside world. I like your discussion of breaking things apart into a management master's and a business master's. Are you seeing any sort of move with schools to do that?
Not directly connecting them. In Europe, I guess maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the one-year master's in management program really got started. It's moved to the US, but they're not viewing it as, I'm not seeing anyone viewing the master's in management as a precursor to an MBA. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing them treating them as a part of a portfolio of graduate offerings.
The number of new courses that happened before COVID and after COVID really also indicates there's a great deal of conservatism in MBA programs, thinking about what it is that they have to teach.
Yeah.
The new courses that came in post-COVID, were they dispersed more broadly than the new courses that came in pre-COVID?
They're about the same, I think.
Mm-hmm. So are you saying that the concentration of new courses after COVID was still in a small group?
Yes, yes. What's concerning to me is a lot of the small, and this is from a business school side, mm-hmm. A lot of the smaller, well-established schools are just not creating new courses, which would suggest to me that the 3 to 7 year big curriculum review things that are done are still in place, mm-hmm. which they need to get rid of, that concept, I think.
Well, I just really want to think that was a real interesting viewpoint in terms of business schools, and you can take that and look at other graduate schools as well. We're moving on to actually something that is very similar to that, of just sort of how alternative credentials will be using and supporting this shift in the future. And I'm sure that a lot of unbundling will occur because of that. Rodney, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. It was really great, and thank you for participating and helping to make the afternoon a success.
You're welcome. I've enjoyed it.